Hello, and thank you for joining me for another virtual dose of vitamin Z, where we bring the Detroit Zoo to you. My name is Zahraa. I'm an education specialist at the Detroit Zoological Society, where we celebrate and save wildlife. Today, I want to talk about a species of reptiles that lives halfway around the world. We're going to be talking about the Chinese alligator, but before we get there, let's take a look at some vocabulary words that I'll be mentioning later on. So I'm going to be mentioning words like marshlands, and then we'll talk a little bit about what makes a reptile, and then what makes an alligator different than a crocodile. So the Chinese alligator is found in China, and to get there, we're going to start off in Michigan, where the Detroit Zoo is, and we're going to fly east over the Atlantic, past Asia and Africa, all the way to Far East China, right over here, where the Yangtze River is. So the Yangtze River is surrounded by lakes and marshlands, and this is the home of the Chinese alligator. So what are marshes? Marshlands are wetlands, so they're areas that are sometimes dry, but usually land that's flooded with water that provide homes to a wide variety of different animals and different wildlife. The marshlands are different than the wetlands we have here in Michigan, because usually the wetlands we have here are surrounded by trees. Marshes aren't surrounded by trees. They're surrounded by different grasses and reeds and rushes. So let's take a look at, before we take a look at a Chinese alligator, let's talk about some of the other vocabulary words. So let's talk about a reptile and an alligator. So what makes a reptile a reptile? Oftentimes reptiles are confused for amphibians. They kind of look similar, and people seem to think that they both have that slimy skin, but really a reptile is defined by its dry, scaly skin and by the fact that it lays its eggs on land, and that its young are born on land and spend time on land before going into the wild. Amphibians, on the other hand, usually lay their eggs in water, and then their young, their tadpoles, will live in the water before they get to land. So that's a big difference between the two and separates the two types of animals from each other. Alligators and crocodiles are both reptiles, and they're very closely related. But a major difference between them is where they live. So alligators live usually near fresh water, whereas crocodiles usually live near salt water. Another big difference is the shape of their noses and their mouths, and some behavioral differences as well. So let's take a look at the Chinese alligator. So this is a picture of one of the Chinese alligators who lives at the zoo. And the Chinese alligator is smaller than American alligators, and it's also the only species of alligators that's not found in the Americas. So this is the only species not found in the Americas. It's found in China, and it's smaller than the American species. It can be up to half as big as some American species. It's only about 5 feet tall, so that's about the size of an average, or slightly shorter than an average adult woman. And it weighs less than 50 pounds, so it's very not big in size either. Despite being smaller, it does have a bigger head than American alligators, and it has a way to distinguish it is it has like that upturned nose, so it has a nose that kind of points up, and it has like this bony structure right above its eyes that help give it this armored appearance, and that bony structure is also repeated on its belly. So what do Chinese alligators eat? They have a very varied diet. They are opportunistic eaters, so that means they eat whatever's lying around. So some of these things include, or whatever they happen to come across. Some of these things include snails, some of them include crustaceans like crabs, they'll eat insects, they'll eat small water birds, they'll also eat rodents. So the benefit of living in a marshland is there's a lot of things that are around, a lot of living things around, and there's a lot of things to eat. Because they eat so much crustaceans, they've actually developed this adaptation where their teeth are very blunt. So they have these really blunt teeth, and that's really good for crushing animals like crustaceans that have shells. All right, so the alligator lives for a very long time. In under human care, it can live up to 70. It's slightly less if they're living in the wild. All right, so how do they live? Well, one second. We're going to take a look at an alligator, and what happens is that the Chinese alligator is the only species of alligators that hibernates in the winter. So it spends its winter underground, but around April every year, it'll come out and it'll start to bask in the sun. So it'll lay down in the sun like this, and that helps warm it up, because alligators are cold-blooded and need heat to warm up their bodies. As it starts to get hotter, they will start to spend less time out in the sun and more time away from humans. So the Chinese alligators are nocturnal animals. So not only are they the only animals that, one of the only species that hibernates, they're also one of the few nocturnal animals. So what they do is, once it starts to get hotter, they'll switch to that nocturnal cycle where they'll spend more time awake during the night and asleep during the day. And where do they go when they do that? They go to a network of tunnels that they've built underground. So they use the space in the winter when they're hibernating, and they also use it during the day in the summer months to get away from humans and the heat. And they get away from humans because humans are a threat, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But these tunnels are made up of a series of different rooms and pools that they can walk around in without having to come out on top and be seen. This helps keep them cool in hot summer months, and it also helps keep them away from humans who are a threat. So how are humans a threat? Well, one way is humans hunt the Chinese alligators, and they've actually caused a major decline in their population. Another thing that's caused a major decline is habitat loss. So those marshlands, they're very fertile and really good land for growing crops. And as crops have been developed and these marshlands have been taken over by humans, less and less space is left for the Chinese alligators. Today, there's only about 100 Chinese alligators left in the wild. This means that they're critically endangered. Scientists think there's a really good chance that if things continue the way they are, there will no longer be any Chinese alligators in the wild. So, I want to show you a pair of Chinese alligators who live here at the Detroit Zoo. So this is a breeding pair of Chinese alligators who live here. They're a male and a female, and they were introduced sometime last year, and the idea is to help reestablish a population of Chinese alligators in under human care. And this is really important because this species survival plan through the Association of Zoos and Aquariums is a way for all zoos to work together to ensure that there's healthy, diverse, and strong populations of alligators in human care who can one day reestablish a population of alligators in the wild once habitats and ecosystems have been reestablished. So these guys were introduced sometime last year, and so when they first were introduced, there was a glass barrier separating the two just to make sure that they like each other and they want to be together. And that glass barrier got to be taken down really, really quickly because they definitely liked each other almost immediately. They haven't produced any eggs yet, but the female is still very young, and females actually start producing eggs at about 3 to 4 years old and continue to produce eggs up until 50. So we feel like she has a really good chance of producing eggs one of these years, and we'll see some Chinese alligator babies. Now, we talked a little bit about the tunnel system that the alligators live in and how they live underground, and they're moving from room to room using these tunnels. Today's activity gives you a chance to build a tunnel system and have different rooms. So to do this activity, you'll need a few materials. All right, so you'll need some supplies like recycled paper, cardboard, tubes, so you can get creative with what you use. You'll also need some tape. And then for more of a challenge, you're going to need things like furniture and sheets, and I'll tell you why you need those in a little bit. Your challenge is to build a tunnel system that connects at least 3 rooms to an entrance and an exit. And you want everything to be connected using tunnels. So I've started mine over here, but I haven't quite finished. So I have one of my rooms here, and I used the cereal box that I decided to wrap. And then I used for my tunnels, now remember they have to be hollow. I used a cardboard tube or a paper towel tube. I have my second room right over here. I did a better job wrapping this one. And I'm going to connect the two, and I'm going to continue connecting the two until I have my 3 rooms, my entrance, and my exit. Now, once you've done all of that and you've built your small model, I want you to see if you can make that life size and if you can expand it and make it bigger. To do that, you are going to use things like furniture, you're going to use chairs, tables, and you're going to use sheets and towels and try to make it bigger. And as soon as it's all life size, see what it's like to be a Chinese alligator and to crawl through the tunnels going from room to room. So doing this activity gives you a chance to build and see what it's like to be an alligator living in a underground tunnel system, but it also gives you a chance to practice some skills like creativity, engineering, spatial reasoning, and developing and using models. To share your tunnels, both small models and life size with us, you can email them to education@dzs.org. And if you're interested in learning more about the Chinese alligators, feel free to check out the Detroit Zoo's website. In the meantime, thank you for watching, and check back soon for some more virtual vitamin C.